Hi, everybody. My name is Don Dixon, and I want to thank you for joining me for another edition of our master class on the mechanics of fishing. And as you can probably see, I'm not on my home lake. This is a real big lake out here. This is the Gulf of Mexico, and I'm on vacation this week. And my wife and I come down here with the family each and every year, and this is our little time that we take and enjoy the beach. And she always insists on throwing some cast and doing some surf fishing. But for me, I like just being at the beach, and this particular spot is Longboat Key. It's kind of in between Bradenton and Sarasota, Florida on the west coast. There's a series of keys. Longboat Key, the one we're on, beautiful, and the one right below it, Siesta Key, another beautiful key. And these particular areas have probably the prettiest beaches in all of Florida. And it's just a great place to be. And normally, I would have just, my wife encouraged me to just take the week off. However, I've had this thing on my mind about our discussion on depth and speed control, and I wanted to continue that, and I didn't want to wait until next week to start because it's on my mind. And I thought it was important that I have this talk with you. So I'm filming from the ocean. I hope you don't mind. And as someone once said, wish you were here. But if you ever get a chance, come to Longboat Key, check it out. I'm guaranteeing you, you're going to like it. You'll enjoy it. At any rate, here we go. Most all of the examples that I gave in our discussion on speed control, now we talked about depth over the last 2 or 3 sessions in great detail about how all of our knowledge ended up playing a part in that last end depth control question. It all comes together. However, we also were zeroing in and talking about the importance of the speed control. And in most of our talks, my examples were sort of to the slow side of speed control. And in a couple of occasions, we were talking about walleye. And walleye, by nature, is a slower fish. He's slower than the bass. He's one of the species that we already know going in when we start fishing for a walleye. He's a pretty slow fish. Now, even though in the summer months, as the water warms, they will speed up, but they never get quite as fast as a bass will get. They're basically a slow fish. And so much of the time, when you're running into the school, I'm talking about the school of big fish, the school of walleye, 5, 6 pounders, 7 pounders, hundreds in a school. When you run into those fish, normally it's downstairs. It's not up in the shallow somewhere. It's not along some 7-foot little break line. It's downstairs. And of course, the deeper we go, as we talked before, the colder the water and the more dormant and non-chasing fish become. So even during an activity period, sometimes these walleyes, we're making contact 45 feet of water. It's a pretty slow presentation. So I don't want you to misunderstand that most of the time we're emphasizing this, how slow do we have to go? Because if you ask Buck Perry about speed control, in the end, I've never heard him say anything different than this. About the time, as you're fishing through the entire season, about the time you think you're going too fast, you say, go a little bit faster, and then you might be right. In other words, in his opinion, 95% of the time, most all fishermen are fishing far too slowly. They're not fishing fast enough. So don't misunderstand what I'm telling you, because I'm going to tell you another slow speed story today, but for a particular reason, a little bit different than just speed control. This particular situation is a culmination of everything we've been talking about for the last 4 or 5 sessions that involves depth and speed control, where all of it comes together in my mind to create a situation that I'm going to share with you. And I hope because this was so important to me that it becomes something that becomes really important to you, is something that you're going to never forget. And the reason I told you the Buck Perry story up at Lake Pepin, where if you jumped the bait, it was too fast, when Buck hit those white bass. And once I started copying exactly what he was doing, he caught a couple of hundred fish in an afternoon. Crazy. Well, those are the kind of things that would stick in my brain. I never forget that. And it wasn't that it was a slow speed or a next to nothing speed control. It was that it was speed control that made all the difference. It was the difference between catching fish, not catching fish. So that was the important lesson, not whether it was really fast or really slow. It was just another defining moment for me that showed me the importance of speed control. Now, that being said, I want to also mention, we talked about faster speed control just in the last session, and I sent a bunch of people to go check out that little video that could probably tell the story better than I could ever describe it, about that speed control, how fast we were going in Lake Kissimmee to catch those bass. And this is something that I learned over and over and over and over being with Buck. Most of the time, our answer was going faster, even faster than we suspected it was going to be, in order to catch the fish. But I keep reversing. I keep giving you one thing and taking away and going somewhere else. But I have to do it that way. Understand this. Because Buck wanted us to run those on-the-water schools, I spent 15, 18, 20 years up there in Canada on the Winnipeg River fishing basically walleye. Sure, we caught thousands of smallmouth, and we caught so many northern, it's ridiculous. But it's really a walleye river. So I spent my summers, at least 15 or 16 straight summers, fishing nothing, pretty much, but walleye. Now, I've shared with you also that my favorite fish is bass. I'm really a bass fisherman. But the school was being run in an area where it had a bunch of different species and a lot of different structure types and so on and so forth, a lot of different water to search and look at, and it was great for training. But the bottom line was, it was a walleye river. It's mainly a walleye area. It's known to be a walleye area. So some of my stories and a lot of my examples are going to involve what happened during the summer months at my school. So this is another example of the Winnipeg River. And I'll tell you exactly what happened, and then I hope you get the idea of what I'm trying to do by telling you this story. It was about 1992-ish, something like that. Again, a long, long time ago. But I was convinced I needed to make a walleye video. And back then, of course, I had some bass videos. I had different types of videos. That's when we were shooting Betacam and making videotapes. An antiquated story today, of course. But I thought it was time that we shot a walleye video and talked more about the walleye specifically, even though our study fish for all the things I talk about, all things Buck Perry, our study fish is the best. And we talked somewhat about the walleye. But I thought it was time to really zero in on walleye specifically and make a tape dealing with that. And the main reason for that type of thinking was the walleyes were becoming basically, I used to consider it the second most important fish as far as being in the fishing business. It's bass number one, and pretty much everything else comes after. But the walleye had been growing in popularity, and a lot of the state conservation and fisheries departments have been aggressively stocking walleye. A lot easier to do that than largemouth bass, the survival rate and all of the things that the biologists talk about. But it was becoming a more and more popular species. So I decided I'd make this video. Now, I think the last time we talked, I also shared with you back when we were shooting beta and we're shooting film, you just didn't turn the camera on and pull the trigger because it's too expensive. When you were burning film, you were spending a lot of money. So we had to plan these things and pick a day, bring the camera people in, shoot the video, and be done with it. We couldn't like fool around. And take our time. But at any rate, we had a great guy from Orlando, Florida. His name's Carlos James. He did a lot of national ads for Ford. He's a really good guy. And he was one of the few people that really picked up on what we needed to do to shoot outside, to shoot fishing stuff, especially from a training and a learning standpoint. He was really good at it. And we really appreciate everything he ever did for us. He was great. He did a lot of filming for us. However, because it was his business, and he was a high-end talent, and he was shooting one of those big old Sonys about this big, you know, that you put on your shoulder. You all have seen them. And at the time, I knew those cameras cost $250,000. So when I hired him to come to a shoot, it cost money. Now, I'll share with you, he probably doesn't want me to tell you this, but it's been so many years ago. He's probably quadrupled his price by now. At any rate, back then it cost me $800 a day just for him to be there. Not counting the film and the editing and all of the other things that would go on afterwards. So, we had planned our summer school, but we arrived 2 days before the school. And I called Carlos and I said, here's when I want you to be up on the Winnipeg River with me. And he took care of his own reservations and his plane and all of that. And he got up there. And I knew I didn't have to go out and map the river. I've been fishing there for 12, 13 years at that point. I knew where all the fish were. I mean, that wasn't a problem. The only question that came into play was seasonally. Are these fish where they're supposed to be, where they have been for the last 12 years? And that was always a little bit of a concern, but not really, because every time I went up there, we were just into those fish. You know, most of the time it was trolling spoon plugs. Sometimes it was that river rig, which we've talked about. I'll explain more on that later, by the way, in some of the videos coming up. But we go out to the river, and we got there a day before Carlos, my wife and I. We got nobody else. It's me and my wife. And she had become an excellent, excellent presenter when it came to running wire and stuff. She is more accomplished than any of the students that I really ever had. So she and I were going to go out and check and just make sure the fish were in the river where they normally are. So that when the guy came that we're spending $800 a day on, that we were going to be able to make our film in a day, or a half a day, even better yet, and be done with it. And then the rest would be in Orlando, would be back in the editing room and edit it together. So, excuse me. So we were excited about to get out there and just confirm what we already knew, that the fish were there. And we went out the day before Carlos arrived. And we went to our number one spot, which I've already explained to you, the saddle, which led to another, which also connected to a bar, where we had caught thousands of walleyes over the years. I just wanted to confirm that the fish were in the river so we'd know it would be good the next day for filming. Funny thing happened on the way to the river, like someone once said. And this weather system came through. It wasn't just weather. It was a squall line that blew so hard that it's part of the story that I'm going to tell you. But it was terrible weather. Now, I didn't need to go out and catch a limited fish. I didn't need to go out and catch, a ton of fish. I just needed to make sure those fish were in the river. So I had to at least catch a few to be satisfied. But the weather was horrible. Well, I started making my trolling passes with my wife like I normally would. And most of you, I know most everybody that's in listening of my voice right now, that's ever fished a river knows, without me saying it, when you're trolling a river, 99.999% of the time, you're going against the current. It gives you better control. You're going upstream. Gives you better control. When you're going downstream, the current will kind of force your lures in a position you don't want it to be in, and it's harder to control your depth and or your speed. So, for 12 years, I haven't been doing anything different. I've been trolling upstream like always. And I think I mentioned to you about this saddle. It's 35 feet on top, 32 feet actually at the shallowest spot, but it was quite wide. It's almost like, I'm guessing, it's about a football field wide of the 32, 35-ish depth before it drops on the downstream side into 60 feet and on the upstream side into 60 feet. The brake lines on this saddle are at 37 feet, 42 feet, and 47 feet. The last drop off, 47 feet into 60. My wife and I started making our trolling passes like we had been doing for 12 years. Nothing different. And I could follow those brake lines. First, I would check very quickly the top of the saddle. But I don't think, over the years, I didn't catch 10 fish off the top of the saddle. They're always at one of the brake lines, either at 37, 42, or 47. They're at one of those three brake lines. Now, as you make the trolling pass up over the saddle, it kind of starts angling upstream, but it doesn't just go straight across the river. It makes a turn, creates a little bar, and then it starts angling again, makes another turn, creates another little bar, and then it creates a third little bar before it actually turns and starts heading straight up the river, and then flares out a little bit and up over the railroad trestle. It's a pass I told you about before. Okay, that being said, my wife and I are making our pass. Starting downstream, we're moving upstream, doing what we normally do. And I mean, that wind is blowing. Now, the current coming under that railroad trestle and down through that chute is about 12 miles an hour. It's fast. And so we're trolling with wire line, which gives us perfect control. And we're trolling the top brake line at 37 feet. Trolled that with spoon plugs. All the way up under the trestle. No fish. Go back downstream to the 60 feet, drop our lures in the water and back up over the saddle, making that pass all over again, but this time at 42 feet. 42 feet in braking. And I hit all those little mini bars along the brake line where I always catch fish, and finally get to that hook where it turns and heads straight up the river before it hits the trestle, where I always catch fish. No fish. Man, I make a trolling pass with my wife, two of them, 37 and 42 feet, on that structure and not catch one fish. That's almost like a scoop. I mean, that's hard for us to not catch a fish. So I started, of course, getting a little anxious thinking about it, so drop back down the river again, drop into the 60 feet, up over the saddle. Now I'm following the 47 feet and breaking, the drop off. I hit every one of those little spots, the little bars on the brake lines, all the way up, hit the hook, up over the bar, at the trestle, railroad trestle, no fish. Ooh, I'm a little concerned now at this point. I don't catch a fish on a drop-off. That's really a scoop. Now, it could be that they're just not at all active. The weather's sort of nasty. So the idea was to just keep fishing. All I need to do is catch 3 or 4 fish. I'd be happy just to know that they're there. And of course, I wanted to catch big fish. I don't like catching little fish. It doesn't do anything for me. I wouldn't make a film with little fish. Just wouldn't do it. So I needed to hit a few fish for confirmation. So we drop down and make the pass again. We start all over, 37 feet, 42 feet, 47 feet, whole series of passes, no fish. Now that's twice we've gone through the series of passes on my most favorite structure of all time. No fish. Ooh, Okay, I said, all right, let's drop to the river rig. Let's slow everything down. So we went to our river rig, and those of you who haven't heard me talk about it, I have this little piece of tape I'm going to share with you, in the next few days, that you can go and see exactly how we run this river rig. At any rate, it's a slower speed control. So we went to that, and we went through our series of passes again. After I made the pass at 42 feet, no fish, I really was concerned. So now I've made a series of passes with spoon plugs, and I've made 2 long passes. Now each one of these passes in total takes about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I've been doing a lot of fishing. I still don't have the first fish. So I am getting concerned because my he's probably on an airplane. He's already on his way. So we make the pass at 47 feet. And I was struggling to control the boat and make a good pass. And I'll tell you why. The wind was so strong. Now this is going to be hard for you to believe, but that's what makes this whole story so good. The wind was so strong, but it was blowing up the river. Mind you, I'm trolling up the river against the 12-mile-an-hour current. And after I made the last pass with my wife, I said, I hate to say this, but it feels like that wind is sort of skating and pushing me up the river, even though I'm going against the current faster than the current is driving me this way. And I said, it's making it almost impossible for me to make a good pass. So I said, babe, I'm not sure what to do right here. But I feel like even though our procedure in our mind is right about slowing down to check the speed control, this wind isn't allowing us to do it. It's blowing so hard. And I mean, there were like 3 and 4 foot waves blowing up the river against the current. I said, babe, like Buck said, depth and speed is all you need. I can't believe that there's no fish in here. It's possible that from a seasonal standpoint, they're not there. It's possible, but I don't believe it. I believe the fish are here, but we're not getting a good presentation. We're not able to control our depth and speed, which is what you and I have been talking about since we started this whole discussion. I wasn't doing a good job, but it was no fault of mine. I just couldn't do it because of the conditions. So I swung the boat over to shore. We pulled into sort of like a little bank area, and I poured a cup of coffee, and I sat there thinking. And of course, I was talking to my wife. I always bounce stuff off her, and she always has some good comments back to me, and sometimes can remind me of things that I need to be reminded of. But I said, babe, we can't present lures out there. It's a mess out there. Our problem is we're going too fast. That wind is skating our boat upstream, even though there's a 12-mile-an-hour current. It's overcoming the current. I said, and then I tried to explain to her, you never troll downstream because it really creates a hassle of your lures digging in, and if you're using weights, weights getting hung up. I mean, you just don't do it because the current is forcing your stuff all the way down there and creating a mess. So I said, we never do that, but you know what? We're going to try. I said, I can't get, like for instance, in that hook, where I always catch fish in that last hook. They're just sitting in there. I said, we didn't catch one fish. I said, it's probably because I can't get the lure in there right. And I had tried one pass where I just got up on top of the saddle and come off the saddle heading upstream down into that hook. But again, the wind was shoving us so fast, I couldn't get a slow enough speed control. Just couldn't do it. So I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to experiment first because I'm not sure what it's going to take. But the weight we're using on our river rig setup normally would be 4 ounces. But because of that wind and stuff, we were actually using 6 ounces to try to get it done. and it wasn't working. Excuse me. So I said, we're going to have to try a few things in order to try to get it right. And I said, the first thing we got to do is lighten up our weight. And I think we went to 4 ounces, and we started at the trestle, and we started trolling downstream against that current, and we could go as slow as we wanted to go. But the 4 ounces was too much weight. It was hanging up. It was dragging and hanging up. So I stopped. I said, reel in. We reeled in. Went back up again to the trestle, above the trestle. And I said, we'll go to 3 ounces. So we put a 3 ounce on our dropper weight, running a big Magnum Rapala in the back. We wanted to fish to see the Lord. And we started trolling downstream with the current. I know it sounds weird, but we're trolling downstream with the current against the wind. And when our lures hit that hook, where I normally catch a lot of fish, boom. And I don't mean just a little strike on with a fish. I mean, it was like a ton of bricks. Pow! I said, babe, it's a good one. This is a good one. I reeled it in, 9 pounds. Ooh, okay. That was pretty weird. We trolled downstream with a 12-mile-an-hour current to slow our speed control down because the wind was so hard. Actually, I couldn't believe it myself. It actually worked. We went back up. I said, I gotta know, are they sitting in that hook? Gotta know. Went back up again, come down, made another pass. We hit that hook. Pow! My wife hit a fish, 8 pounds. We went back up. Come on down again. Pow! 9 straight fish on 9 casts trolling downstream with a 12-mile-an-hour current against the wind. Now, I can tell you, she could probably tell you if you ask her, that was probably, to me, in my mind, that was one of the biggest conquests that I had over the fish in my life. That was it. I said, you can't fool me. And the reason you can't fool me is Buck drilled it in me. He drilled it in me. Fishing, didn't matter where we were. It didn't matter the species. Total drilling it. Depth and speed, depth and speed, depth and speed, depth and speed. If you're not catching, your depth and or your speed is wrong. I had assumed that my depth was right. I've been catching fish on those 3 break lines for 12 years. At that same time of year, I had to know that they were there. I felt in my heart they were there, but we weren't catching. But I knew my depth control was right. That only left speed control. And to actually put together this weird troll downstream with a 12-mile-an-hour current because the wind was pushing so hard this way, it was just like we were hitting a brick wall, which is what we needed to do. We created that 0 speed control, 9 fish on 9 passes. And the only reason I didn't stop was because I knew one day I'd be telling you this story. We could have stopped after the 4th fish. I said I wanted to catch 3 or 4 fish. Well, after we hit that little secret for that day, we just kept it up. And I have some pictures. I'll have to try to find one. My wife's hair was all over the place. We were a mess. We looked like a couple of drowned dogs when we got off that water. But we won. We beat the fish. We beat them at their game. They were there. They were ignoring me because the wind was blowing. Well, I can't have that. You know, I had to figure something out. And the fact that I did figure that out is one of the most, as I stated, one of the most pleasing things ever in my whole fishing career. When I told Buck about it, he just shook his head. Man, that's really nuts. I said, yeah. But I was there, and I said, if I put that motor in neutral, the boat would actually go upstream against the 12-mile-an-hour current. That's how strong the wind was. I said, but because of that, it allowed me to do something that no one ever does, and I don't either, and that is troll downstream with the current. But depth and speed was what caught those fish. And the next day, you know, when we went out there the next day and went to film, the weather had changed, the wind had stopped, and guess what? We were catching those fish, trolling upstream like we always had in the past. Here's why that story is so important. You know, when we talked about the muskie tournament, we talked about Lake Pepin, or we talked about the tournament in the Winnipeg River, and the speed control and the depth control. We talked about all of that. But the biggest part of that whole story was once we established that you need the proper speed, you got to bring and lure by a fish where he is at the right speed, as per his metabolism, as it pertains to his level of dormancy. Is he active? Is he dormant? We don't know. We have to check our speeds. So we talk specifically the science behind the speed and how fish change in depth all the time and how their level of activity changes the deeper they go or the shallower they go. We talked all about that. But when we got into depth control and we talked about the muskie tournament, we had to include a whole bunch of things to arrive at the proper depth control, not just what depth is the fish in right now. It's what leads us to the place, the what depth control, the where depth control, the why depth control, the when depth control, and then finally the how depth control. I just told you a story about the how depth control. But over a 12-year period, going back to the first day I found that spot and mapped it, that I already established the when, or the where, and the what, and the how. Already established all that stuff. But that particular day, I wasn't sure about the how. I had the what, I had the where, had all of that. But I had to adjust the how to control my depth and speed. Now, the depth control was the big discussion. What lake type, what species of fish, what time of year, the activity of the fish, the weather and water conditions, and all of the things that we talked about play a part in allowing us to arrive at the proper depth control. And then all there was to do was to adjust your speed until you hit that speed that triggers that fish to strike. Now, all that being said, the reason this story of today is so important, I had the depth control. I had it. I've been catching fish there for 12 years. Not only have I been catching fish there, but I drew the map. I can point to every little spot where the fish should be. I used to tell students, you should catch one right about now. And within a second or 2 or 3 seconds, and there'll be a lot of witnesses to this, boom, they hit a fish. They say, how do you do that? We're at 45, 47 feet, and you're telling me when a fish is going to strike? Because I knew where his lure was. Because I was driving the boat. I knew where his lure was. I could pretty much predict it. That's how well I knew the what and the where and all of that about that spot. But that day, something had to be changed in order to catch those fish. I had to prove that they were there. And I did something so crazy, out of the box crazy, that when I told Buck, even he was shaking his head like, man, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. And I said, yeah, it was. But because of everything he taught me, on every fishing trip I was ever on. And folks, I can promise you I'm telling you the way it is. Everywhere I went with Buck Perry, we caught fish. There wasn't such a thing as not catching fish. That Lake Pepin story, that was like the closest thing I could ever remember. We actually spent a half a day without catching fish. Never happened. You were at Buck, you catching fish. And every time, day after day after day, he reminded me. He scored it in my brain. Depth and speed control. Depth and speed. But there were a few instances, which I've shared with you now, that proved beyond any shadow of a doubt I had arrived. I knew what he meant. It finally hit home with me. It's not just depth and speed whenever you feel like it, or depth and speed once in a while. It's always depth and speed is the difference. You either catch or you don't catch. And that story up today, those fish were there. They were there big time. Now, we did stop after the 9th fish. I said, I don't want to keep hammering this school of fish. We just let them alone now. We know they're there. However, it took something really crazy in order to make it happen. And it was only because Buck taught me well. He made sure that I understood. You want to catch fish, you've got to have your depth and your speed right at all times. And I appreciate you being with me here at the ocean today. We're having a great time. It's a little cloudy right now, so I might just go through a few casts after we shut the camera up. At any rate, thanks for being with me, and whatever you do, follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate you, and we'll see you the next time.